welcome to the University of Nottingham PGCEi webinar. My name is Helen Spiropoulos and I'm the Admissions Manager at Stafford Associates. And joining me all the way from the university this evening is Dr. Rupert. Good evening to you, Dr. Rupert.
Hi, Helen, and hi to everybody here. So it's good to be joining you, and hope we'll be able to give you some useful information tonight.
Fantastic. And I can see there's quite a lot of you that have joined us already. Good evening to you all. How are we going to conduct this webinar? I'm just going to briefly introduce Stafford and what we do in the Middle East. I'm then going to hand you over to Dr. Rupert, who's going to talk about the program. And right at the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to type up your questions. So you can see your little chat box on your right-hand side. Do type up those questions and Dr. Rupert and myself will be able to answer those. A lot of your questions will be very, very similar, if not identical. So we'll obviously try and group them all together and give you the answers that you're looking for. Okay, so let's get started. Who is Stafford Associates? Stafford Associates was established in 1993, and we are the resource centre for distance learning education in the Middle East, and we're currently the resource centre for 5 UK universities, one of which is the University of Nottingham. Now, we do offer a variety of programs, starting from certificates to diplomas, bachelors, MBAs, MECs, right through until doctorates. So we really have programs for every single person. And what our function really is to assist you throughout your registration process. We do provide you administrative support, and we also offer some academic support as well. Okay, so I'm going to now hand you over to Dr. Rupert, and I'll be joining you later after the presentation. Over to you, Dr. Rupert.
Okay, thanks very much, Helen. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the University of Nottingham and the course itself. Hopefully what I tell you is going to be useful and relevant to you. But of course, as Helen said, you can ask questions, and if there's anything that's not clear or any additional information, then please do type in your comments. So first of all, thinking about the University of Nottingham, many of you will have heard of the University of Nottingham. It's one of the elite Russell Group, as they're called in the UK, the top group of universities, long-established universities. It's a name that has a good reputation around the world. You can see here on the screen some of the rankings that have come out in terms of ranking the university globally. So it's a name that is known internationally. And it is actually a global university in reality, in the sense that we have campuses not only here in the UK, but overseas, including China and one in Malaysia as well. So we've got a well-known university here and a name that people will recognise and that carries some weight and credibility if it's on your award at the end of a course. In terms of education, the University of Nottingham has one of the top education departments in the UK. So it's been around for more than 100 years and one of the biggest education departments in the UK. It's ranked currently 4th in the UK in education, so behind Oxford, Cambridge and London. And I believe in the last research ranking was placed 3rd in the UK. So what you can see is this is a department that is within a university with a great reputation, but also a subject that has a good reputation. And what that means is that here in this building where I'm sitting right now are lots of colleagues who are internationally known, who are people who are researching actively in education and are really driving the field on in terms of the work that they do and the writing and so forth. So in terms of the course that we're going to be talking about tonight, what that means is this course has been created on the basis of all of that expertise. So some of these people who are at the forefront of their field have contributed to the materials of the course, to the design of the course. Some of them you'll even encounter in video material as part of the course. And some of them are teaching on the course as well. So the tutors that you meet are people who are all working here in the University of Nottingham in the School of Education. So you know that you're in safe hands in terms of not only teaching, but research in education. So I'm going to go on and talk a bit about the course itself. So we're talking tonight about the Postgraduate Certificate in Education International, so referred to as the PGCEi. So this is a course that's an education qualification that's at master's level, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute or two. It's what we'd call a blended learning program. So by that we mean that it includes face-to-face tuition with tutors from the UK, such as me, and also some learning that you do online through our VLE, our virtual learning environment, which is a really comprehensive set of materials. So that's why it's blended. It's the face-to-face as well as learning online. It's a course that's aimed specifically at international educators, so people working around the world. It's a course that is actually, to give you the bigger picture, taught all around the world. So we have cohorts on this course in Asia, places like Thailand, Vietnam, China. We've got cohorts in South America, various places in Africa, in Europe. So this is a course that is truly global and is aimed at people working really in international education, wherever that might be. So you're part of a huge community of hundreds and hundreds of people studying on this course. And in various ways online, you will actually have the chance to interact with people from all over the world. It means, of course, that it's also a qualification that's known around the world and isn't something specific and restricted to the Middle East region where you might be working at the moment. It's a course that is not a teaching license. This is something that people often ask about, and they say, is it a qualification that qualifies me to be a teacher? A teaching license, which we might call qualified teacher status in some countries, like in the UK, is something that is always country specific. So in the UK, there'll be a set of standards that teachers meet, and other countries in the world will have their own requirements. So this is not a teaching license. It is a qualification that will add significantly to your CV, your resume around the world. It's a course that will really open your mind to education, give you a fantastic theoretical grounding in education. But it's an academic course, and we'll talk about the modules in a moment, but it's an academic course of study about the principles of education. You'll learn a lot that you can apply in classrooms or other educational settings, but it's not a course that assesses you in school or any other setting. So you're not going to be assessed on your practical teaching in a classroom. It isn't that kind of course. So that's often a question that we have, and that's quite important to understand. So even though it's not a license to teach, it's something that really adds to your skills and your understanding as an educator. And working at master's level is all about challenging some of your assumptions, opening your mind to new ideas that you maybe haven't thought of, looking at your existing practice in new ways. So I tend to refer to when I was a teacher in school, which was my background some years back, and I did my MA, so worked at this sort of level, did an MA in education while I was working in school, and it really changed my practice. Although it wasn't about assessing what I did in the classroom, the ideas that I got, the new ways of thinking, really challenged me as an educator and really moved me on, and certainly aided my career as well. So that's the sort of motivation that most people would have coming onto a course like this. So we said that it was a blended learning course, and that part of that was to do with having face-to-face meetings with tutors. So what happens with this cohort that meets in the UAE is that we come out twice during the course to see you. So at the start of the course, within the first few weeks of the course, we will come out, a team of tutors, including me, we'll come out and we will do face-to-face teaching with you. We'll have a 2-day, really intensive workshop. So hard work takes place over a weekend. So it's not a relaxing weekend, but it's a really enjoyable and stimulating weekend. What that means is that you have met your tutor. So you will be assigned a specific tutor. You will have met them. You will have worked in a group with that tutor from the start of the course. So when you're liaising with us after that, maybe from a distance, you know who you're talking to and you know that person, and hopefully you have a bit of a relationship that you've built up, some trust that you've built up. We then come back about halfway through the course and we see you again, and we move on in terms of some input about the rest of the course, the second half of the course. And of course, that's a really nice chance to get together with other students as well. So part of these face-to-face meetings is, of course, some orientation to the course. So helping you to understand how the course is structured, what the expectations of the course are, what all the different modules are about. But they're also about having some input from us in terms of new ideas. So some actual teaching input from us. And really importantly, they're about meeting other educators. Because wherever you might be working at the moment, it's easy to get stuck into your little world where you work and the way things are done. And it's really healthy to step out of that and to see what else is going on. So you'll be in a group with people from different regions, from different countries, from different types of school, who are operating on different types of curriculum, who maybe were educated themselves in different countries. So a huge part of our face-to-face meetings is actually that networking and that finding out from each other. And we really want you to go away with a sense of a community that you've developed and people you can keep in touch with. So you've broadened your horizons and your possibilities as an educator. So we'll talk a little bit more about how the course is structured. The course takes place over more or less a year and consists of 4 modules. So these modules are all compulsory, so you don't get to choose and pick modules, but within each module, you can make some choices about some of the things that you study. So different modules allow you to select certain units to study. And you also personalize this by making all of your assignments related to your field of work. So for example, if you're an early years educator, you're going to be applying the ideas and writing in each case about your own early years practice. If you work with secondary mathematics students, that's what you'll be writing about, and you'll be applying it to those settings. So although the course is a general course, it's for people working in any age group in education, it's generic in that sense, you can choose modules, choose units within modules and select topics according to your own interests and always apply it into your own interests. So the 4 modules, which each have an equal weighting, take you on a bit of a journey. So the first module is all about the aims and the purposes of education. So I don't know how often you've stopped to think, why do we do this? What is education for? What are we hoping that our students are going to gain from this? Is it just academic knowledge? Is it qualifications? Is it something for their economic well-being? Is it more about a rounded person who's a good citizen? And so on. There's many reasons we might educate people. So we're going to explore the different aims of education. We'll do that in the context in the first module of international education specifically. So again, asking questions. When we say international education, international school, international teachers, what exactly does that mean? It can mean an awful lot of things, so we'll look into that. The second module, once we've explored the idea of what education is trying to do, is focusing on how people learn. So we're going to look at various theories and approaches to learning. Some of them will be things that you may have heard of before, others definitely not. Some of them will be things that you can immediately see a connection to your practice with, and you go, okay, I recognize this. Others will perhaps be challenging or unfamiliar. So we want to, again, using that phrase about broadening your horizons and your practice, we'll look at different ideas about learning. Module 3 then makes a logical step into saying, okay, well, if that's what education is for, and this is how people learn, how might we teach them? So in Module 3, we're going to be looking at different approaches to teaching. Some of the things that educators encounter all the time, including different ways of grouping pupils, dealing with special educational needs, differentiation, these kind of topics, assessment and so on. And then finally, the last module is really asking, well, if we've taught our students, how do we know they've understood? Because learning is only taking place if somebody has actually learned and understood something. It doesn't necessarily follow because we've taught something that somebody has learned it. So the last module is about understanding and about assessing your students' understanding. And it's called a final project because you can choose what you want to investigate. So we ask you to investigate an aspect of your students' understanding. So a concept that you teach your students, and to investigate what they make of that, and to find out in various ways what they understand, what they don't understand. And that's really done by you collecting some data in school on a very, very small scale. And it provides a model for you to be a teacher who is also an inquirer, or even in a very small way, a researcher, that you can then carry that on and take that into your practice. So each of those 4 modules is assessed by some coursework that you submit and a 3,000-word assignment. So there are no exams, but there are these 4 assignments to write. The assignments are all related, of course, to the module content, but also we ask you to relate them to your own area of practice. So as I've mentioned already, you can relate them to the age group or the subject that you teach. So you have a choice about which direction you take each of these assignments in. Quite often people are nervous about writing the assignments. Maybe they haven't worked at this level before. Maybe it's a long time since they were last studying, and people think, well, I'll be the only person who hasn't written an essay in 20 years. I can assure you we have people every year from all different backgrounds, some of whom have studied very recently, some of whom haven't, some of whom have studied subjects similar to this, some of whom haven't. So part of the work that we do at the face-to-face events, the workshops, is helping you look at what we mean by academic writing at this level and what makes it successful. And we look at some models of other students writing. And we also support that afterwards through, with the first module, allowing you to submit a draft of your first assignment, which isn't graded, but you get very, very detailed feedback from your tutor so that you have a practice go before you submit your first real assignment. So we do support you in all of that. So we said that this course is at master's level, and it can of course be taken on its own as the PGCEi, your certificate there in education. But what you've also got is you've got, if you're successful in all the modules, a third of an MA. So you can use those credits and continue studying with us. It doesn't have to be immediately. It could be years later. You can continue studying with us and complete your MA in education. If you do a general MA in education with us, as most people who do this would do, you can use all of your 60 credits and have a third of the MA already completed. But there are various specialist MA routes that you can see listed here, like special needs and leadership and so on. Also TESOL, teaching English as a second or other language, early years, in which case you would usually transfer perhaps just 30 credits because that's a more specialist route of study. Going back to the PGCEi itself, when you're not with us face-to-face on those teaching workshops, you have comprehensive, extensive materials online on the VLE. They include readings, they include video and audio material. They also include forums that you are invited or required to contribute to, where you can discuss issues from the module with people from your own cohort, but also people from all over the world who are studying the same modules. So that's a huge wealth of resources there. And it's worth saying really that all of the readings that you'll need are accessible through this portal. Some of them are embedded in the modules and you can just open them up. But you also have access to the University of Nottingham's library, which is fantastic, one of the best libraries in the UK, with huge range of electronic books, electronic journals. So as a student on the course, you have access to that. So you don't need to be accessing a library yourself. You don't have to be buying books. You have access to plenty of books, journals, and other resources through the university's library, more than you could possibly ever get round to using. The tutor that you've met at the face-to-face event is going to be your tutor who follows you through the year. And we work really closely with our groups. So I've got a group at the moment from a current cohort in your area. And each of us have a group of no more than 20 people that we work with. And my group at the moment, for example, is working on their third module, and they'll be submitting their assignment on Monday for module 3. So I'll be looking forward to reading those essays. Your tutor can be contacted at any time through emails with queries, and we can also arrange to speak to you online as well if you want more sort of tutorial support. So just moving on to the entry requirements here. So in this region, you'd be applying through Stafford, and you obviously have familiarised yourself with Stafford by virtue of the fact that you're here with us tonight. So usually we're looking for a degree, an undergraduate degree, usually at least a second-class degree or an equivalent. We do look at people who perhaps are not in that position. If you have instead extensive professional experience and other qualifications, and you can be very convincing about that, then we would look at other what we call non-standard applications on a case-by-case basis. But the usual position for nearly all of our students is that you are a graduate. And if English isn't your first language, then as it says here, you need to have the IELTS qualification there at this level. Also important to say, you need to be an educator. Now, what do we mean by an educator? Well, it's quite a broad definition. The vast majority of people on the course are working in schools, although we do have some people who come on the course in a few cases who are working, educating in other ways, like training people, for example. You need to be somebody who is perhaps a teacher, but not necessarily a teacher. You could be a teaching assistant. We have a lot of people on the course every year who are teaching assistants. It's possible that you could be working on a voluntary basis in school, as long as you have access to the classroom. So particularly for modules 3 and 4, you will need to be working with pupils. Modules 1 and 2 are going to require you to reflect on what you do and what you've seen in school. Modules 3 and 4, module 3 will require you to actually do some teaching and write about that. And module 4 requires you to be collecting some data from some pupils. So you do need to make sure you've got access to a school, to a classroom where you can do those things. And of course, access to the internet so that you can work online at times. We've talked already about the non-standard applications there. So applying, I'm not going to talk through all of these things, and I'm sure Stafford's academic consultants can guide you through a lot of this as well. You can see here what's required if you're applying. The bit I'm going to just draw your attention to in particular, though, is the personal statement. So the personal statement is your chance to sell yourself and to be really convincing about your experience. What I would say is, if your application is a non-standard application and you don't have the usual entry requirements, but you're making a case for yourself nonetheless, then you need to be especially clear about how you're going to be ready to do this course. So I point you towards being very clear about your motivation. So explain really clearly why you want to do this course, what benefits it's going to have, what you think you're going to get out of it. Explain what skills and experiences you have. And in particular, if you are saying that perhaps you don't have that first degree, what academic experiences do you have? How can you convince us that you're ready to work at this level and work at master's level? Have you got things that you can point to there? And of course, as in any application like this, have you got some transferable skills in terms of communication, organisation, etc.? Your references, of course, well, your reference there, that's really powerful and that's really important. So your referee, of course, will write whatever they want to write about you, but you can prompt them to maybe refer to things that are particularly relevant to what I've explained about the course here. So your ability to organise, to meet deadlines, your experience in school, your commitment, and again, in particular, if your application is a non-standard one and there's a potential gap in your application, if your referee, the person writing your reference, can refer to something to reassure us, that's really, really important as well. So our next intake in this region is in October this year. So that's one of the cohorts that I'll be working on. So I'm going to be looking forward to coming back to the UAE and working with the next group of students. Hopefully some of you today listening will be involved in that. So that cohort would officially start on the 1st of October, and your application needs to come in a couple of months before that. So you can see there the deadline. And we'd urge you to get your applications in as soon as possible, any time from now, because the cohorts tend to fill up and the places are strictly limited. So best to get in as soon as you can. The face-to-face workshops for this particular cohort, you can see the dates here. So I said that the group began on the 1st of October. So you can see there what I meant about meeting you very, very quickly. So within the first fortnight, you're going to be meeting your tutor and having that first 2 days intensive teaching period there. And the second workshop being there at the beginning of March next year. And you've got details there on fees. So I've covered the main things that I normally talk through, but it's over to you. There may be things that you'd like more information on that I can help with. So hopefully there'll be some questions. I'm going to get Helen to sort of interpret the questions, maybe cluster them into groups where people have asked about similar things, and we'll do our best to answer. And if there's anything that we can't answer today, I will find out for you, and I can get back to Helen and she can communicate with you afterwards.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Very informative, Dr. Rupert. Okay, so I see that we have got quite a few questions. Nadine's question is quite an interesting one. We get this quite often. What is the differences, between a CELTA program and the PGCEi program?
Yeah, so the CELTA program, and this is my understanding, not that I work on these programs, is very much about sort of language teaching. And for people who want to go and sort of teach English abroad, those programs are very well established. This is a program that's much, much broader. So this program will cover those types of things, not in perhaps as practical a way. This is, remember, a master's level program. It's covering principles of education. It's covering theories of learning. So I would say it's a much broader program is one of the main distinctions, but would actually complement the CELTA program quite nicely.
Excellent. And Cecile is currently working in a school environment where the mode of teaching is predominantly in French. Even though she's very fluent in English and she has done some English, teaching before, would this be a problem in getting into the program?
I don't think it would be. There's obviously that requirement we mentioned about your own English proficiency. The actual mode of instruction, though, the language of instruction, is not going to be a particular issue, I don't think. You'll be writing about what goes on in English, of course, but we work with people who are teaching in schools, for instance, doing some of the teaching in Arabic or other languages. So I don't think that would be a particular problem, no.
Excellent. And Anastasia and Nadine's have got a very similar question. How many hours should I dedicate a week to my studies?
Yeah, so this is a very popular question. Maybe we should even put this in the presentation because it's comes up a lot, and it's really understandable, isn't it? Because people doing this course almost always are working already, sometimes part-time, very often full-time. So your question you ask yourself is, I'm pretty busy already, how can I fit this in? So these modules, these 15 credit modules, have a standard kind of work rate or number of hours allocated, which is common across universities really. So for a 15 credit module, we'd be looking at something like 150 hours of effort or work. That's going to vary, of course. Some people work more quickly than others. Some people are more experienced than others. So as a rule of thumb, we would say, to put that into something perhaps more useful, something like about 12 hours a week is what you might expect to commit to this. Now, some people do that by doing a little bit every evening. Some people do that by having an intensive day at the weekend where they just work on this all day. So it's that sort of size of commitment. Of course, you can be flexible. You can manage your time around your commitments. It's going to be demanding, of course, because if you are working and you're doing this on top and there are deadlines that have to be kept to, then that is going to be hard work. But every year, this is something that people are anxious about. And for the vast, vast majority of people, they manage very, very well with this. I remember when I referred just before in the presentation to when I did my MA, when I was working in school, I was working full time at the time. I had a couple of very young children at the time. And yeah, I was asking myself, you know, I must be crazy. How could I do this? And I tried counting up how many hours spare time I had. And I gave up counting that because it wasn't going to work. But I for some reason, I threw myself into it, and it was fine. And you know, you are able to do these things and probably do much more than you expect. So something like that, 12 hours a week, is something to think about. But it is very doable, and people manage and juggle those commitments very well.
Excellent. And a nice, very important question here. I understand that the workshops are compulsory. However, if I cannot attend the workshop for a reason that may be beyond my control, will I be kicked out of the program?
Yes, the workshops are compulsory, and it's really, you know, it's for a good reason in that it's a complicated course. It's something where you do need some guidance through it, and it's quite difficult to succeed if you haven't had that face-to-face tuition. Normally, what happens is, you know, if you know that you're not going to be able to make the first workshop date, and of course, if you're thinking of applying now for October, you can already see 12th and 13th of October. If you know that you can't make those dates, we would be asking you normally to defer to another cohort. So we have a cohort starting each year in October, like this one, but we also have another cohort starting in March. So you wouldn't have to wait for a whole year. You could wait just half a year and join the next cohort. Now, if you're already on the course and something happens around the second of those meetings, again, it is a compulsory thing to attend. But if, you know, sometimes life gets in the way, doesn't it? And if there's something major, you know, a family tragedy or something has happened, then we're going to look at that on a case-by-case basis. We would need some evidence from you, and we'd need to look at you making a good case for what has happened and sort of proving why you couldn't attend. We wouldn't want to or seek to be kicking you off the course, but it would have to be a very, very exceptional situation.
Good. And Hiraya has actually got two questions. She's a librarian and wants to know if there's a possibility of getting into the program. And the second question would be, can I finish it in less than 12 months?
Okay, so the short answer to both things is yes. We have had people in the past who worked in school libraries who've done the program. So that's okay in principle. I would just go back to what I said about having access to the classroom. So, and the fact that in the third module, you do need to do a bit of teaching, When we say teaching, that could be with a small group of students. It doesn't have to be taking a whole class. And depending on how you work as a librarian, I'm assuming that you're a librarian in a school setting or an education setting. Maybe there's work you do even within the library that you could count as a kind of a lesson, perhaps, or you could work with a teacher in a classroom and do something. As long as you feel that you can do that and you have that access to learners in that way, then that's okay. The second question was about whether you can complete more quickly. Yeah, in principle, you can do that. Usually, it's very unusual to do that because people find that there's a lot of work to do and it's hard to get through the modules ahead of time. But we can negotiate with you different deadlines, and that occasionally does happen. What we normally do is we ask you to try module 1 first, see how you get on, see how you cope with the workload, and then maybe adjust the dates for the other modules. But yes, in principle, you can do that. If you were going to start in October, by the way, your last assignment normally would be given in July. So we say it's a year's course. Really, your work is over a 10-month period. But when we take into account the marking after that and being processed through an exam board, that's why it's a 12-month period.
Right, exactly. And the next question is from Meisner. How many teaching hours will I be required to do in Module 3?
We ask you in Module 3 to do to teach a sequence of lessons. So when we say a sequence, we tend to say that would be at least 3 lessons. There's no rule about how long a lesson is. And clearly we're not going to be there to see you doing that lesson. So this is just a vehicle for you writing in the assignment and reflecting on the teaching that you're doing. So in terms of teaching, typically if you were teaching perhaps between 3 and 5 lessons, a sequence of lessons on a particular topic that followed on from each other, that might be between 3 to 5 hours. So that's typically the way it would work. It might be within a single week. If you were working in the primary phase, for example, and you see the same learners every day, it might be something you accomplish just with 1 lesson a day through the week. If you're working as a secondary teacher, for example, and you see a group a couple of times a week or even once a week, perhaps it goes over a number of weeks. But sort of between 3 to 5 lessons in a sequence, so that gives you a rough idea.
Okay, and Omar's question is, what are the consequences of failing a module? Am I allowed to resubmit, or do I have to repurchase that module again?
Okay, so if you fail one of the assignments if you fail the assignment in a module, you do get a chance to resubmit. Normally, you get 1 chance to resubmit, and that isn't just done independently, so you would have a lot of guidance. So you'd have detailed feedback already from your tutor, and the feedback would tell you exactly what you need to do to put this right and to improve the grade. You would also have the opportunity to talk with your tutor and have a tutorial, an online tutorial in some form, so that those things could be explained and you could ask any questions and be completely clear before you do resubmit. And the usual time we give you to resubmit is around 6 weeks. So we're not asking you to do that immediately. You have plenty of time. And when we say resubmit, normally it's a question of reworking that assignment rather than starting all over again. You're going to amend it and improve it along the lines that you've been told. You don't need to purchase the module again. There is a resubmission fee. So there's a fee for you resubmitting that assignment. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's not a huge fee, and it certainly isn't a case of purchasing the module or paying a quarter of the fees again for 1 module.
Okay, and Nadine's question is about her certificate and how she's going to receive it, because she doesn't live in the UAE. Nadine, I can answer that very quickly. The university does invite you to the graduation. in the UK. So we do encourage you to attend that, because that's a really special occasion. You really worked very hard, and it would be great for you to attend and collect your certificate. However, in the event that you cannot attend the graduation, you can ask the university to have the certificate couriered to you. You're very welcome to have it couriered to Stafford, and we can actually forward that to you. But do make an effort to try and get to that graduation.
Yeah, so as Helen was saying, as you can imagine, a lot of people, the majority of people, can't come to graduation, so that's completely normal. And you graduate, you know, in your absence, you still graduate there, and we do send out the certificate usually around about October. The graduation ceremony is usually the middle of December, so it ties in often with time, school holiday time that people have. So you may have a bit of time off that time of year. So if you do come over to the UK, it's great to see people. In the last couple of years, we've started having a bit of a gathering before the ceremony itself. We hire out a venue on the campus with food and drinks, and tutors from this course, from the cohorts all over the world, come together, and any students from anywhere in the world on this course come together with us, and we get to have a chat with you and just have a nice time socializing before the ceremony itself. And you know, and if you can come, it's great, and you can feel part of the University of Nottingham in that way.
Good, excellent. And sorry, I'm going to have to try and pronounce this name. It's Branika, I think it is. At the end, do you have the marks on your certificate? I think you're talking about.
You won't have the marks themselves, but the way that this is graded is like other master's courses. So there are 3 levels of pass. So you can have a pass, basic pass. You can have a merit, which is higher, and then highest of all, you can have a distinction. So it will, your award will say what your level is: pass, merit, or distinction. It won't tell you exactly what the numbers were on the actual award.
Okay, and can I stop my studies for a short while and then resume again? And if I can, what is the maximum duration that I can complete this program?
Yeah, so if we wouldn't usually encourage you to begin the course if you know there's going to be an issue that's going to interrupt things. But of course, often, well, not often, occasionally people begin the course and something happens, you know, circumstances in life change for some reason. So of course we can be accommodating about that, and we have a system. If there's a good reason for you to stop and you explain and justify what the reason is, we have a process called a voluntary interruption to study, or a VIS for short. And you can you contact your tutor and explain the situation. There's an official form online that you fill in, and you can negotiate a VIS for a period of time that's suitable for your needs, depending on what's going on. The limit really is determined by the fact that I think it's a maximum period of registration on the course of 3 years. So in other words, from when you begin the course to when you finish the course, all has to take place within a 3-year period. So you could stop the course, you could have a VIS for instance, a whole year, and sometimes people do that. And as long as you really don't have other interruptions, then you know, then that would be okay. So it's not something I would set out thinking that is going to be likely for you. But if something happens, then that is a system we have, and every year in every cohort, it's something that, you know, 1 or 2 people will do. So that's fine.
Good. And Nadine's question is: do we have breaks in between? Because I do want to actually go through, you know, on holiday with the kids during the school break. So will there be breaks in between this the different cohorts or the different modules?
Yeah, well, it is natural to still want to have a life, isn't it? And see your family. So I understand what you mean there. We don't really build in breaks. It's quite an intensive course. There's a lot to fit in. But you can manage your studies. so that you can get ahead of yourself if you want to. Even if you haven't changed the deadlines, you can get ahead of yourself with work if you know that you've got a holiday coming. And if I'm looking, for example, at my current group that I'm working with, I said to you already that they are giving in their Module 3 assignment on Monday, next Monday, so that's the 30th. The next thing they need to give in, I'm going to have a look on my chart, which is next to me. The next thing that they'll give in after that is on the 28th of May. So that's a month, pretty much a month away. So in that month, of course, they've got work to do, ready for that next thing, but their deadline is a month away, so they can manage their time. So there isn't a set break built in, but there is time for you to have holidays and, you know, do the usual things that you would do.
Okay. Do I have to access my online study portal on a daily basis?
No, not at all. It's entirely up to you how you manage your time there. There are things that we require you to do, like submitting to the comments on the forums and things that I mentioned to you, and you will have to spend some considerable time there, but certainly you don't have to engage on a daily basis. We'd encourage you to check your email, your university email account that you'll have on, I guess, perhaps every 2 days would be reasonable, just to check if there's any messages that have come through. And we can actually look on our VLE and we can see exactly who has looked at what on what days. So we do know, and if we have concerns about a student's engagement, we can, out of interest, we can find out whether they've looked at things recently or not, but there's no requirement, and that's for you to manage.
Okay. And can the teaching hours be completed with children with specific learning difficulties, or does it have to be mainstream?
It can be with any students, so any age group, but also if you're, for instance, a teaching assistant or a teacher who's working with children with special educational needs, and you perhaps work with a small group of students in that way, and that's your normal role, that's fine. And as long as you're doing something which we could think of as being a lesson, then working with children in that category would be fine, yeah.
Okay, and will my certificate state online distance learning?
No, it doesn't say that. It will say part-time, but it won't say distance learning.
Okay, and my referee, does this referee have to be from my current school, or can it be a previous supervisor?
It could be somebody from previously. I guess it's one of these things, like if you're applying for a job though, and if you have a referee who isn't your current employer, then sometimes people might wonder why, but that's your decision to make. So really you want to pick somebody who can say not just positive things, but who can say relevant things about you. So perhaps that might be somebody from a little way back in your career.
Okay, and if I happen to move countries during the period of my studies, is it possible for me to still continue?
You can study wherever you are in the world, but we would still need you to come to those 2 face-to-face events. So if you've begun the course and you've come along to the UAE for the first workshop weekend, and then at some point in the year you move elsewhere, you're just going to have to come back one more time for that weekend, for that second workshop. But other than that, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world.
Okay, and does this program provide me with QTS in the UK?
No, it doesn't provide you with that. So this isn't giving you QTS or any kind of license for any country. If you're interested in working later on in the UK specifically, and then for most schools in the state school sector, you would need to have QTS, qualified teacher status. What you can do is you can follow what's called the assessment only route into teaching. So this is something that's specific to the UK, and it involves you working in a school as an unqualified teacher to begin with, and being assessed on the job in that school. So you wouldn't have to do further study. You would build a portfolio up, you would be observed, and you would gain your QTS while working on the job. That's for people who've worked in at least 2 schools. That isn't something that's organised by us. So the University of Nottingham doesn't provide an assessment only route, but there are providers of this all over the UK. We can certainly point people towards providers, and the government here has a website. If you just Googled assessment only route into teaching, you would find information there about the way that works and the different places where you could do that.
Okay, and does the PGCEi course give you an advantage if you decide to continue your professional development, specifically going into an MA in education?
Well, it gives you a definite advantage in the practical sense that you've got a third of your MA already, so that's good. And in terms of applying for the MA with us, we treat you as if you are already one of our students, because you are. So in terms of the application to the MA, that's very smooth. You're not having to make another case and maybe be rejected or anything like that. We assume really that you will be able to make that progression as long as you've passed this course. So there's an advantage there in that sense. It of course gives you a chance to try out working at this level and get a feel for it, and you can then decide whether you want to do that further study at that level. So yeah, certainly I think if you are thinking of going on to do that, it's a really, really good first step. And the advantage is, unlike just beginning an MA, where really you then need to complete the whole qualification, which normally would take 3 years part-time, by doing the first year as the PGCEi, you're getting a qualification at the end of that year. So you've got something there in the bank, and then you can go on and complete the MA as well as that. Excellent.
Okay. And Nadine's question is, can we pay the fees via the bank? As I don't, okay, I'll answer that. It's to do with the fees. Yes, Nadine, absolutely. If you get in touch with your Stafford consultant, they will be able to give you the relevant banking details, and you're very welcome to send the fees into the banking account. Do get in touch with your consultant on that. Okay. And is the IELTS test required to be an academic one? I have got an 8.5 IELTS, but it's not really in the academic stream. Will this be accepted as proof of English?
Okay. I'm not an expert on the IELTS qualification, so that might be something we'd have to look into specifically for you. So what I'd suggest is, if you want to maybe send those details in, and maybe Helen, you can pass those on to us if it's something that you can't answer at Stafford, but I think we'd need to look at that specific case.
Yeah, Misno, in general, we have had in the past something similar to your situation, and admissions does have a look at it, but 90% of the time they do require an academic IELTS. Okay, but do send in what you have got, and we'll obviously send it through to the university for review. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions, Dr. Rupert. I think we managed to actually get through all of them. We have managed to club them all together. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It was great having you all. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Rupert. It was wonderful seeing you again.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you for everyone who's attended. And I really hope to see some of you for real in October, perhaps. If you do come on to the cohort, come and say hello, come and say that you came to the webinar, because it would be really interesting to get feedback and hear about whether it was useful or whether there were other things that we should have told you. So do come and identify yourself. But I hope to see some of you face-to-face in the UAE in October, or maybe at some point in the future with another cohort.
Excellent, thank you. And good evening to everyone.
Okay, good evening, goodbye.